We all think we know the story of Adam and Eve, right? The Garden of Eden, the snake, the apple. But what if we've been looking at it through the wrong lens? What if it's not just a simple story about the past, but something way, way deeper? Today, we're going to unlock this story as an apocalypse, a symbolic revelation of timeless truths, all through the incredible analysis of theologian Milton Spenser Terry. Okay, let's get into it.
Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll tackle the big question. Is this story history or is it an allegory? Then we'll break down its surprisingly accurate map of temptation. After that, we'll dive into the hidden prophecies in the divine judgments, unpack the meaning of the guardians at the gate, and finally, we'll connect the Bible's very first chapter to its very last.
All right, so first up, let's tackle the big one. How are we actually supposed to read this foundational story?
I mean, right off the bat, we're hit with things that make you go, You've got a serpent that talks, you have a tree that magically gives you knowledge of good and evil, and another one that gives you eternal life. These are things we usually find in fables or myths, not exactly what you'd call a straightforward historical report. And that leads us to the critical question, right? Is the point of this story to be a literal historical account? Or is it working on a totally different level, using powerful symbols to tell us something profound about the human condition?
Well, the scholar F.W. Farr, who Terry quotes, gives us his amazing framework. He says that even the ancients saw the story not as simple history, but as a philosopheme. And this is so important. This isn't some New Age reinterpretation. It's a classic, deeply rooted way of understanding the text.
So what in the world is a philosopheme? Well, think of it this way. It's a big, complex philosophical idea wrapped up in a story. So instead of getting a dry lecture on the nature of sin, we get this vivid, unforgettable picture of it. And that right there is the key that unlocks everything else.
So let's move on and see how this story gives us this brilliant map of temptation, a map of our own psychology that is just as real today as it was thousands of years ago.
The narrative shows this super clear four-step process for how sin takes root. It always starts with a thought, just an idea. Then that thought starts to grow into a wish, a desire. That wish then hardens into a purpose, the actual intention to do the thing. And finally, that purpose explodes into the act itself. This is a pattern we see everywhere, and it's just masterfully shown in Eve's conversation with the serpent. And get this, the temptation itself is broken down into three parts. First, the woman saw the tree was good for food. That's a direct appeal to our physical appetites. Then, it was a delight to the eyes, an appeal to our aesthetic desires, what we want to possess. And finally, it was desired to make one wise, a powerful appeal to our pride and ambition. Terry points out that this is the exact same three-part structure that the Apostle John identifies thousands of years later: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It's an absolutely incredible psychological portrait. Okay, so after the action comes the reaction, the consequences. But if we're reading this as an allegory, these judgments aren't just punishments. No, they are carefully structured, apocalyptic prophecies about the nature of our broken world. And this is where Terry points out something truly stunning, a pattern. Each of the three parties, the serpent, the woman, and the man, receives a fourfold curse. Just look at the structure here. 4 distinct consequences for each. This isn't just random bad news. It's a deliberate symbolic structure that hints at how apocalyptic judgments often unfold in these kinds of 4-part phases, a pattern you see pop up elsewhere in biblical prophecy. It's wild.
But here's the amazing part. Hidden inside the very first curse, the one on the serpent, is the very first promise, a prophecy. It foretells this epic, ongoing struggle between the serpent's offspring, which represents evil, and the woman's offspring, representing the line of redemption. This one sentence sets the stage for the entire cosmic conflict that plays out for the rest of the Bible. So after the judgment, we're left with this incredibly powerful final image at the gate of Eden. And it's not a symbol of total loss, but of a hope that's being protected.
This detail is so cool you might miss it. Okay, a sentence of death has just been passed down to all humanity. Everything seems lost, and what does Adam do? He names his wife Eve, which literally means lifespring. It's this incredible act of faith in the middle of despair. It's like he's holding on to that promise that her descendant, her seed, would one day make things right. It's a shout of life in the face of death.
And this hope is perfectly symbolized by the two things guarding the way back to the garden. On one hand, you have the flaming sword.
That's a perfect picture of divine justice. It's sharp, it's absolute, and it shows that sin has real consequences. But right alongside it are the cherubim, which are always associated with God's holy presence and glory. Terry sees them as symbols of divine love, pointing to a future plan of redemption that can actually satisfy that justice.
And this is the whole point right here. The path back to the tree of life isn't destroyed, it's not gone forever, it's guarded, it's preserved. That implies the way isn't permanently closed, but is being kept safe by both the justice and the love of God, just waiting for the day when humanity can finally come home. So, this all brings us to our final section, where we can see how this first apocalypse in Genesis creates this grand story arc that finds its amazing conclusion in the Bible's very last book, the Book of Revelation.
I mean, the parallels are just breathtaking. In Revelation, that old serpent, Satan, is finally and totally defeated, making good on that ancient promise to Eve. The curse that was pronounced back in the garden, the Bible explicitly says it is no more. Humanity is given access once again to the tree of life. And full circle, God's home is once again with humanity, just like it was in the garden in the beginning.
When you look at it this way, it's so clear. The entire Bible is basically the story of the journey from a garden to a city, from a paradise that was lost to a paradise that is restored. The first apocalypse in Genesis plants all the seeds of conflict and promise that the final apocalypse in Revelation brings into full, glorious bloom. So we're left with this final thought. If Genesis 3 isn't just an old story about something that happened once, but is actually a symbolic prophecy about the timeless war inside every human heart and the ultimate hope for redemption, how does that change what it means for us? Well, it stops being just a story about the past. It becomes a mirror for our present and a map for our future.